Lakers. I want to talk about basketball real quick because the playoffs are going off right now, and they're getting down to the wire, right? So a couple series ended this week. You had the Heat finish off Milwaukee. Yeah, so there's the question about what's going to happen with Giannis. And then last night, the Celtics won and beat the Toronto Raptors, knocking out the former champions out of the playoffs. So now you're going to have a Heat sort of Celtics series. But my question for you is, and of course the Lakers are going to win tonight against Houston to go to the Western Finals to face either the Clippers or what does it really matter, Nuggets. But the point is,
wow.
What's your thoughts on Giannis? Where do you think he ends up? Because he's still got 1 year left. So going into the playoffs and even during the season, there was all this talk that Giannis may end up leaving Milwaukee if they don't get a championship, right? Or at least get to the finals. And they didn't. They didn't even get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So they got knocked out in the second round again. Couldn't get any further. Question is, do you think Giannis is going to leave? Or do you think Milwaukee goes out and gets a Chris Paul to really help the team? Because Chris Paul is a free agent from OKC, and he could very well come in and help keep Giannis there longer because he'll help balance that team out better than what they've had in the playoffs, which has been pretty piss poor. So what are your thoughts? How do you think this goes? Do you think Giannis plays out this next year under contract and then just plays from there, or is he looking to get traded or extended?
I think that you have to look at with what's his mindset. Is there anything that
nobody knows? Nobody knows. Yeah.
I mean, I think Milwaukee has to try to see if, like you said,
or should he stay in Milwaukee? Maybe that's the better question. Should he stay in Milwaukee?
Yeah, but then you get into the whole thing of what's the point of having small market teams?
I agree. But my question is, should he stay in Milwaukee?
Question is, would he want to stay in Milwaukee? That's going to come down to that, right?
Yeah, right. And I think that's my point.
If he's not able to, if they're not able to get to the post, right, any further than that, right, is he going to look to see where he can go to get traded for?
No. Okay, so Chitty, did you watch the games? Because
a
lot of the things that I've heard was based on that he also didn't play well.
Yeah, so obviously there was the comments at one point by Richard Jefferson saying maybe Giannis is more a Pippin than a Jordan.
Yeah.
Right, and then
that's how Pippin's comments back to him.
Yeah, Pippin's comments, and he knows Richard Jefferson, so Jefferson didn't take offense to it. He knew what he was talking about. But then there's also the recent comments by ESPN's Max Kellerman, who said, actually, Giannis is more like a Shaq waiting for his Kobe. Right, yeah. He's a big guy who can do a lot, but he can only do so much. He's not going to be that driver, that power, that guard who's going to tear it up for you. And so the question is, which one does he fall under? Is he more like a Pippin? Or I'd even say he still could be a Jordan waiting for his Pippin. I mean, you can reverse that too.
Yeah.
But I watched all the games, and yes, Giannis did struggle. And interestingly enough, when he went out, got injured, they won Game 4. So they pulled that one off, and they were down 3-0. They finally win. They go 3-1. And then in Game 5, they were competitive the whole game, but they just didn't have enough to get done, and so they lost in 5 games. And so the question, to your point, Atlanta, is like, is Giannis, and this is true for even last postseason, does he struggle? Yes, he struggles in the postseason because they focus everything on him. And they know, they'll get physical with him, they'll take advantage of him, and they don't have guards who can help, get him opportunity and space to get free. So realistically, there's only a few point guards in the league who can do that for him. Obviously, Steph Curry is one because he draws all the attention. The outside shooting, back to your point earlier, Len, it's a perimeter shooting league now. They don't do a lot of internal development anymore. And it's every league goes through cycles, right? Something new comes in, and everybody starts copycatting, and then they kind of go that route. So it can change again down the road. But I actually think, would it be great for him to stay in Milwaukee? Sure. I think the only way they get him to consider re-signing, and they'll pay him the big money, by the way, even as a small market, they'd pay him the max contract.
But can you get the other players?
Right. So there's the question, would that then hinder them from being competitive? To your point, Mike, right? If they're not going to be able to get competitive, then why stay? So it's a hard decision, and I think that's all going to play in his mind. I think in the end he leaves. I don't think he stays. I think where he goes is still a debate because there's some teams that could potentially afford him, but the trade value they have isn't the best. There's also the talk maybe the Warriors will get him. But the problem is I don't see Milwaukee wanting to give him to the Warriors, at least unless, and this was something that I read online by another sports writer who made a good point. only way he can go to the Warriors is if he himself tells ownership, I'm not going to resign. I want to be traded, and I only want to be traded to the Warriors. And then the Warriors would be able to kind of work some sort of deal that doesn't completely screw them to get him in. Otherwise, based on caps and whatnot, they just can't do it.
Or I mean, at a certain point, will Milwaukee just say, you know what, we'll just keep you for this year then?
They could do what New Orleans did with AD.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And then they get nothing.
Right, but at least they haven't. I mean, again, seeing it from a small market team like how Cleveland was, or is, with dealing with LeBron, a superstar like that holds them hostage because you can have a good collection of players, but LeBron was a draw. I mean, it's as simple as that. So it was the reason why he stayed there, but it was also the reason why they always were hurt in terms of when he left or when they actually got to higher competition. Like the Cavs before he left for Miami was always competitive during the regular season because LeBron can dominate 80% of the league, right? I mean, his presence alone meant that they were going to win against 80, or 28 teams easily. But when they start getting the playoffs and against the elite teams, that advantage of him just being a superstar goes away. But a small market team like Cleveland, having a LeBron means people in the stands, people buying your jerseys. Having a Giannis means more, in my opinion, means more to them keeping him maybe for another year and still being relevant than maybe getting what are they going to get from Golden State? They're not going to get Clay or they're not going to get Curry. So who are they going to get from them? Another draft pick or two? Great. You know what that means? That means that the next year their stadium's empty again or not as full as it nearly was before because they're not going to have those players. I mean, what OKC did was pretty amazing, continuing on this year. But I mean, usually when you have those big players drop out of a small market team, look, they're not going to draft again, and they're going to see a major drop off. So ownership and everybody, I could just see them keeping Giannis and saying, you know what, let's say relevant as a team for another year, and then we'll deal with it when the time comes when he leaves, because they're just not going to get enough from the Warriors to be able to justify him just leaving.
Yeah, and I only suggest the Warriors because that was the name that
was mentioned. But
yeah, I understand. Yeah, but
I don't expect the Warriors are going to get him either. Primarily because, to your point, what they can offer is they could offer someone like a Wiggins that they traded for during the regular season. Get a Wiggins. They have a lot of good number one draft picks. They got the one only if they do it before the draft. That is, it's only valuable if they do it before the draft, right? But there's not that stud player. There's not a Zion sitting there that would even make their pick so much more valuable. So you just don't know for college, especially since college basketball pretty much ended early. There was no March Madness. None of that happened. So you didn't get to see anybody sort of break out as that superstar that people were so excited for. But yeah, I think Giannis will leave. I agree. Small markets, it's tough to compete. And you're right. You could keep him for a year just to keep people in the seats. But if they know, like this is an example with AD, it's a perfect example. AD last year said, I want to go. And so he was going to play out his contract if that was it, the final year. But he said, I'm not resigning, so it's probably better to trade me. And they waited and waited, and they ended up not trading him. And then they ended up sitting him and just having him sit, which was just stupid.
I didn't that part, but.
Yeah, so they can do the same thing with Giannis. All it does is make the fans will dislike Giannis if he did that same method. That's what happened with AD with the Pelicans, saying Saints because it's New Orleans. But Giannis could have the same thing, but in the end, it comes down to, does he want the money, and knowing that they're going to struggle? Because you're right, if he takes the max contract, more than likely he's going to hamstring the team from being able to buy more or get more players outside of drafting.
Right.
Or does he just go to another team, chase title? Right, go to a team that has the opportunity for titles, whether it's the Heat, whether it's the Warriors, Lakers, whoever it might be.
If it's not the Warriors, who would you see him being? Of course, he's going to be a fit for anybody, but who do you see? Do you see him?
He needs a good guard. I think that's all he's missing. He needs that guard who can get him and feed him the right way and create that separation, make people more afraid. That's why the Warriors would be the ideal spot for him. It'd work for both teams because you have Curry and Thompson. Well, first off, the two greatest 3-point shooters in the game, period.
True.
And then you throw in someone like Giannis, whose physical prowess and ability to move on his size would be what they had kind of with KD Although I say Giannis is more stronger than KD was. KD was just a bit more skilled on the shot, definitely, without a doubt. So, but I think that would put them back up there. But yeah, I mean, other teams I could potentially take him. I mean, the Heat potentially could be a good team for him with Jimmy Butler, but then I think they'd still struggle because
they don't have the guard.
They don't have the guard play. Yeah, they just don't have the guards. You need someone who can create,
isolate the perimeter. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just don't see the Heat doing that. So yeah, I don't know every team's sort of budget allowance, what they have, as far as what their caps are, but I definitely don't see him being there past this year, especially after consecutive years. The only way he would resign, one thing I'm not taking into the equation here is he wants to, he's a emotional person, and maybe he lets that emotion get to him and say, I'm going to prove that I can do it here, so I'm going to take that agreement because I'm tired of people telling me what I should be doing, and I'm going to do it my way. Nothing wrong with that. Like who?
Unlike LeBron.
Sure, yeah. LeBron went to Miami because he wanted titles. He knew he wasn't going to get him in Cleveland, and he pulled his team buddies together. Well, Wade was already there, but he pulled Bosh to come along. And hey, if LeBron gets a title for the Lakers, fantastic. I'm not going to have a problem with it. But
it's funny. My Laker fan, friends who are Laker fans, not you, but other people who hate LeBron.
Sure.
And all of a sudden now we're just quiet about him. And they're not rooting for him.
Yeah, they're not sure. Yeah,
quiet.
Yeah, it's the same here.
They're waiting for him to lose. I think if you did lose this year,
no Laker fan, true Laker fan is gonna be waiting for him to lose.
No. If he were to lose, I meant if he were to lose, then they're gonna rip.
It's a quick finger to point, right? Like, well, he's the one who made the Lakers.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. He built this team. I mean, that's what I come down to. No, not at all. Not at all. We just have expectations, dude. You win 16 titles. You're chasing the Celtics. That's what really bites Laker fans.
What did you say?
You're chasing the Celtics, unfortunately. I'm not going to deny that. I can't. I mean, you can look it up yourself. I can't hide the stats.
Why do you have to agree with me? Why can't you just argue?
There's so much hate with you, JD. With so many, you really dislike sports. You really dislike teams.
No, I don't dislike. Yes, I do dislike teams. That comes back to the point about when your family has your loyalties to certain teams. When you have loyalties to teams, you've grown up in households that have that kind of translates to you in a lot of cases. For you, clearly not. Yours is just more about, let me just wander around the world and figure out that looks good. And that's nothing wrong with that, dude.
There's nothing wrong. I have a lot more fun doing that way. I don't stress myself up, but like, fuck this shit.
No. You want to stress yourself out? Do fantasy football. That'll stretch you out.